Hey, so this is how kind of this week something happened in my personal life that I wouldn't wish on anyone. And I'm going to have to be quite mum about the details because there is the ongoing investigation in relation to it. So, my daughter, who is 15, was approached in an utterly inappropriate way by the father of one of her friends. The police are involved, the correct channels are in motion, and while I won't go into details for many reasons, not least of all the legal ones, I want to talk to you guys about what happens next. Not to um, not to relive it, but to draw from it, because the truth is, I would take delight and pleasure in the um, biblical exacting of my revenge. And when people found out, many of them said the same thing. I'm surprised you didn't batter him, that kind of thing. As if violence would somehow restore what was taken, as if fury would shield her from that event after it's already happened. So here's the thing I want to explore with you today. If we claim to walk the path of deduction, of observation, of reason, if we claim to want to think like Sherlock Holmes, then this is the real test. Not when it's easy, but when it's personal. When you are raging inside, when your instincts um, scream for action, and you choose stillness instead. So today's episode isn't really about a case study from history or a fascinating behavior pattern we've all seen online. It's more about what it means to live the mindset that we study. You know, to think more when others would just act, to choose justice over vengeance, to understand that emotional regulation isn't weakness. It's it's weaponized clarity. So it's more of an attempt to unpack how critical thinking, how restraint, how real behavioral intelligence shows up when it matters most. And because we are passionate dorks, how Holmes's greatest skill wasn't deduction, was discipline. So if you've ever wondered how to protect what you love without losing who you are, or how to think clearly in a world that's addicted seemingly at the minute to outrage, I am going to do my best to make this one for you, because like all episodes, I have an idea of what I want to talk to you about, but I just sit down and I talk to you. When we have guests on, we have some questions that we want to go through and some topics that we might want to hit, but these are mine and by extension their attempts as well to make it feel like a conversation, as though you were just here, right? As though there were no kind of formality about the whole thing. Now, I didn't bring this here to just vent or make a statement in any in any shape or sense. I don't need that from anyone. I brought it here because this moment forced me to use everything I teach. Everything I teach about observation, about emotion, about logic, and the habits of a mind that is trained for reality and not fantasy. So let's go through five five core principles that guide my thinking when the world expected me to act on my rage. And I promise you, these aren't just thoughts for extreme moments. They are principles for everyday mastery if you want to think like Holmes. Emotional regulation is tactical, it's not passive. People assume emotional control is softness, but in reality, it's the hardest path. It's the one that protects everyone in the blast radius. Right? You could look at the arguments essentially between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. These emotional responses like fear, like anger, like rage. They are processed in the amygdala, and the emotional regulation it relies on the prefrontal cortex, which governs planning, judgment, inhibition, most of our executive functions. So, emotional granularity, when you look at Lisa Feldman Barrett or Brene Brown or anyone that really works in the realm of emotion, there's a ton, but they are the most prominent figures that I'm aware of. There's more, but they are the most prominent ones that I'm aware of. For those of you that don't know, emotional granularity is essentially the more precisely you can label your emotional state, the better you can regulate it. It's not just angry. It might be violated, protective, cornered. And those all require different responses. Then, if you look at um, a cognitive reappraisal, the research on it, I think, is the late 90s. There might be something more current. I haven't checked. It's been a while. Cards on the table, right? It's the ability to reinterpret a triggering situation to kind of lead to better long-term outcomes than suppression or some kind of impulsive action. Like the Stoics would talk about the only way to avoid stage 3 fear or stage 3 anger, I think it might have been, is to pause and breathe. Right? Holmes is often misunderstood as cold, when in truth, as those saw with BBC Sherlock and with Elementary to a certain degree, he's deeply feeling, but channels those feelings through a disciplined lens. In the adventure of the Bruce Partington plans, Holmes contains outrage over national betrayal, but he uses strategy to trap the guilty, not brute force. So this leads to something that is very prominent today, and it's binary thinking. You either act or you're weak. It's the dumbest, it's the stupidest possible mindset in a complex world, right? Whether you look at black and white, or dichotomous, or the psychology and decision theory, the thinking in this area, right? It's a hallmark of cognitive distortion. It thrives under stress, but it limits the generation of solution. I was talking about this in one of my classes over the weekend before the whole thing happened. Uh, uh, Type 1 and Type 2 thinking, or depending upon the version of the book you've read, System 1 and System 2 thinking. Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. Quick emotional reactions, as in System 1. They feel right, but they ignore nuance. Critical thinking demands effortful, slow, System 2 engagement. Right? When people frame actions as justified extremes, so like the whole "he would have deserved it" or "he deserved it," right? They they bypass personable or personal accountability and the reduction or the attempted reduction of cognitive dissonance. It's known as moral disengagement. The majority of opinions, beliefs, discussions, ideas, work doesn't revolve around a dichotomous solution. That's a signal of lazy morons who are incapable of nuance or refuse to entertain the nuance because they're scared of being proven wrong. It is a position of ego. Holmes thrives in complexity. In The Silver Blaze, he avoids obvious suspects in order to ask that question that others missed about the curious case of the dog in the night time. In that, the curious case was the dog didn't do anything. Holmes never defaults to one situation, he maps multiple scenarios, then validates, dismisses, and clarifies accordingly. Critical thinking is hardest when you are close to the situation, when you're close to the fire. You've seen it all in every kind of police drama that there is. You're too close to this, Bukowski. I don't know. I just picked on that kind of trite and cliche name, right? The world thinks it's about being clever, but it isn't. It's really about being clear-headed when clarity is buried under emotion. That's why, and personal opinion inbound, bear in mind, that's why I personally think that magic tricks are a good vehicle for understanding this. Right? You heard it in the Holmes stories as well, when Holmes explained, Watson would say, "Oh, it's easy." Right? If you watch a magic trick and you're completely dumbfounded, right, and then they explain the method, you go, "Oh, it's easy." Right? That's all critical thinking exists in. If you can pause with the growth of that emotion in order to provide more clarity, you might see the situation a little bit more clearly. This is as a connector to something I've spoken about till I'm fucking blue in the face. Cognitive load theory, right? 1988, I think. Sweller. Stress increases the cognitive load, which decreases working memory and therefore decision making ability. This will lead to effective forecasting errors. Right? We often misjudge how emotions will affect us, leading to more reactive decisions. It's something that takes particularly fun place in my memory palace, given all of the data around hot and cold reading, is hot and cold cognition. Hot states, as in where you are emotional, aroused, not that kind of aroused, you saucy buggers. It impairs decision clarity. Practiced thinkers train to recognize and defer decisions until they're cold. Again, and don't get me wrong, the whole practice thinkers makes it sound like I'm saying you have to be intelligent or you have to have a massive IQ or you have to this or you have to this. You don't. It is a practice of navigating your emotion. That's it. In the Devil's Foot, as the Holmes story, I'm not just making a loose Satan reference. Holmes is drugged and hallucinates, but he records his perceptions anyway, so he can reflect on them once he's sober. Holmes always favors data over emotional inference. When Lestrade reacts with anger, Holmes turns inward with analysis. Thinking like Holmes, it, 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 it means practicing in advance. In a crisis of any sorts, you fall to your level of training. You don't fall to your level of intention. Right? So if you look at behavioral psychology and skill development, right, this notion of procedural memory. Habits are practiced. They they are practice responses really, and the more you practice, the more automatic they become without training. We default to instinct, not intelligence. Right? If you look at a simulation theory, not the kind of religious conspiracy theory, the the brain rehearses future scenarios, building neural pathways before real action is needed. Right? This connects to stress inoculation training, the exposure to any kind of mental stress, and your coping strategies, cognitive or otherwise, builds resilience. Struggle with that word. Builds resilience and clarity under pressure. Holmes constantly rehearses thinking, whether it's through the violin or chemical experiments or puzzles. He doesn't wait for the next crisis in order to practice deduction. This is about a kind of um, lived preparedness, right? So that when the thing happens, you don't have to build a framework for it. It's already done. And the final point, the, the goal isn't to not feel anger or anything. The goal is more to direct it, to let it fuel the outcome without becoming something antithetical to it yourself. Like using the fire almost, just not becoming it. Right? Neuropsychology and moral psychology to a particular degree speaks about emotions as signals, not instructions. Emotion isn't wrong, but it must be um, interpreted, not obeyed blindly. Right? Anger can lead to constructive action, advocacy, policy, protection, but that's when it's paired with reflection. Right? If you look at the law of emotional contagion, I'm hoping, because it's in this kind of current scenario, I'm hoping that my daughter will see how this particular fire, this emotional state, was handled, so that my blueprint, my framework for regulation, can help her with her own. My restraint isn't quite the right word. I don't really know what I need. My um, channeling helps to protect her future regulation, because she knows, or rather has access to more information regarding what to do with it. Right? If you look at most interpretations that I've seen, and I haven't seen them all, of the the story with Charles Augustus Milverton, Holmes shows a kind of deep fury, but he also uses espionage and disguise and timing to protect the other people that are involved in the story. Holmes never denies emotion. He refines it into um, precision. It would have been so easy just to become how angry I am, how angry I am. But the discipline that I try to work with in my role as an investigator, in my role as a teacher, in my role as a coach, in my role as a father, and my role as a husband. It was an attempt to use that to journey down a more um, appropriate path. That's what Holmes would have done, or at least that's what I believe Holmes would have done. Right? Let's not forget that he was fictional. That's what my daughter needed. And, to kind of expand it out past casework, that's what the world needs more of right now. I'm not about to get on a soapbox, but it's less reaction and more reason. So with all of those things in mind, the kind of takeaway training point is that whenever you are feeling anything that has a particular strength, go back to the granularity and label it with as much precision that you can. Right? Are you just angry? Or are you outraged? Do you feel violated? Has your fragile masculinity been challenged? Where is it coming from? Figure that out. Then how are you best going to channel it into whatever it's done? Because I'm telling you, in your guys' work as investigators, there will be cases you will get involved in that will make you feel things, right? And they're not always going to be pleasant or positive or whatever else. But as we discuss on this podcast, in terms of taking inspiration from Holmes. It's not about denying what you feel to try and sound all kind of spiritual and esoteric, but it is about understanding where it comes from so that you can reason with it and not just obey it blindly. And all that is to say that I also have a very heavy punch bag outside that helps, right? So that's my attempt to just be honest with you, not to be one of those, those silly internet people that just use emotional situations for the sake of look at me. This happened, is happening, but if nothing else, what I hope is that insight can be given. Temporary joy of biblical righteousness is one thing, but we don't live in a dichotomous world. Humans provide the grey area and the nuance that's needed. So it's up to us to be that in the world, if it is that this Holmesian skill set is for you. So yeah, on that kind of note, I'm going to wish you a lovely day and see you all very soon. Take care.